Good evening, moms and dads. Welcome again to another episode of ParentTown TV. Today I have John Tan, who
Hi.
is the CEO and co-founder of Saturday Kids, and we're going to be talking about why kids should learn coding and programming. So it's going to be a very interesting topic. So if you guys have any questions for John, it's a live Ask the Expert session. So what does that mean? It means you go to ParentTown App, you ask your question, and if it's interesting enough and it gets enough upvotes or loves, John's going to answer it, and we promise you there'll be no unanswered questions by the end of the session. So John, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So tell us a little bit about yourself. Are you a dad?
Yeah, I have 4 kids between the ages of 0 and 5.
4 kids under the age of 5.
Yeah.
I thought Singapore had a fertility problem.
No, clearly not.
Seems that way. Wow. I have this instinct of changing this whole topic right now just to talk about how you manage that and how you're sitting here alive.
2 helpers.
Okay.
Yeah.
That answers everything.
Yeah.
So tell us, do all of your kids code?
No, only the oldest one. He's 5 and a little bit. And he's been coding since he was 5. So he started with an app on the phone. It's called Lightbot Junior.
Mm-hmm.
So it's basically like move the turtle stuff, right? So commanding the robot to go to a certain tile, light up the tile. It's really simple. And the great thing is that it doesn't require him to be able to read. So he was able to start playing with it when he was slightly under 5, and by now he's cleared practically the whole game.
Very cool. And what about the other children? Too young to start?
Yeah, a little bit too young. Although I've gotten Summer, who is turning 4 in August, started on board games. So these are coding board games. This one's called Codemaster. And this one is called Robot Turtles.
And these are suitable for children from what age?
Well, so here it says 3 plus. Yeah.
Okay.
I think Codemaster is a bit more difficult.
And
So,
where can a parent buy these board games?
online.
Amazon?
Yeah, Amazon's a friend.
Okay, great. And so yourself, are you a developer? Are you a coder?
I'm not, unfortunately. I actually did economics in college, but I'm teaching myself now. So
Okay.
I'm doing Harvard's CS50. Yeah, so Harvard has a famous Intro to Computer Science course called CS50, and it's available on edX. So I'm doing that right now, and I'm working my way through Free Code Camp,
Mm-hmm.
which is teaching web development, so front end programming, HTML, CSS, JavaScript.
And what about your wife? Is she a programmer, a developer?
No, she's a lawyer.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we have an economics major and a lawyer,
Yeah.
and yet you decided to go into coding school for kids.
Yeah.
So what brought that about?
So I went to college in London. My neighbor in London, his name is Arif. He started Chope, and one day, he said, "No, I'm gonna start this thing. You want to invest in my startup?" So that's how I got into tech, and then I started investing in more startups. So then I've invested in a bunch, and I started hanging out with programmers, and I thought, hey, actually this is pretty cool. This was 4 years ago. So at that time, there weren't any programming school for kids, because I went to search online, and I had a camper by then, and I thought it would be cool if he could learn to code when he gets a bit older. So that's why I started Saturday Kids. So we've been teaching kids since 2012. I think we have taught over 2,000 kids now programming. Yeah.
Very impressive.
Yeah.
And so you're an economist, your wife is a lawyer. Would you want to raise a programmer?
Yeah, I'm not gonna force him to be a programmer, and I think that's the whole premise of Saturday Kids, right? We don't tell parents that, hey, you should join our classes because your kid's going to be a programmer next time. It doesn't matter whether your child becomes a professional software developer, even if he's a doctor or lawyer or accountant or whatever it is, right? Knowing programming and knowing how technology and software work, I think that's really important, and that's why we are here today.
Okay, fantastic. So now I'm going to get on to the questions. that the moms have asked. Let's see. We have the first mom who said, "At what age can I start teaching my kid programming?"
I think 4 is a good age. There are education technology companies out there that are trying to make programming more and more accessible. Google actually just introduced a new product under this category called tangible programming. So tangible programming is basically teaching programming without the use of screens. So I have an example right here. It's called a B-board. Let me turn it on. So programming in its most basic form is to give a very clear set of instructions to an object and making the object behave the way you want it to behave. So what B-board does is you basically command the B-board, go forward 2 steps, turn right, and then go. There you go. See?
That's interesting.
Any
So
4-year-old can do this, right?
so all they have to do is just follow the instructions.
Yeah. So, I mean, you can do whatever you want with the B board. So you could, have a cup over there and say, hey, how do you make the bee go to the cup? How many steps does it take? Does it need to turn left? Does it need to turn right? You can create an obstacle course. So, yeah, you can do a lot with something as simple as this.
So is this what you did to start your son on developing?
No, so he actually started with Lightboard, which is the app, iPhone app. But I know that some parents don't like their kids to spend too much time looking at screens, so this is a great way to get them started. Or it could even be as simple as like commanding your teacher or commanding your dad, right? Get daddy to go to the kitchen, but instead of saying go to the kitchen, you would say move 10 steps forward, 5 steps right, push the door open, move 5 steps forward, and that's how you command your dad, right? So that's really the essence of programming.
So next time I want my my husband to pass me a glass of water or anything, I'll be sure to use that instruction.
Yeah, exactly, do that, yeah.
So we've got Mom Neo who asks, how can my 7-year-old boy actually understand coding?
So the great thing about programming today is that there are all these languages that are designed for kids to learn programming. So by far the most popular is a programming language called Scratch, which is developed by the Lifelong Kindergarten group at MIT Media Lab. And I think Scratch has been around for 7-8 years now, and there's a huge online community. It's basically a visual drag and drop interface. So there's a screen on the left, and then there are all these command blocks, and the child drags the blocks that they want to use on the right, and then you hit a trigger button, usually a green flag or a space bar, and there's immediate feedback. So the child can see what he just did, right? So whatever blocks that he just snapped together, he can see instantaneously what happens on the screen. So it's real-time engagement for the child. So
do you need to be able to read for this to happen, or?
Yes, you do, because you need to be able to tell which block is left, which block is right. But there is a version of Scratch for younger kids. It's called Scratch Junior, and it runs on iPads. So yeah, that one doesn't require being able to read.
Okay.
Or just use Lightboard.
Interesting.
Yeah.
We have a slightly controversial or interesting question here. A mom who wants to teach her daughter programming, but she's scared that her daughter will grow up to be a butch. I'm guessing that means a tomboy. How does she overcome this fear? Is this an unfounded fear?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any relation at all between being able to program and your sexual orientation. I think the example I gave is the CEO of YouTube. Her name is Susan. I can't pronounce her last name.
Wojcicki, I think.
Wojcicki, yeah. She's a mom of 5, and she is a programmer.
She beat you there.
Yeah, I know. I'm
How
getting
could
there.
you let that happen?
Getting there.
Okay, so you're saying developing has nothing to do with sexual orientation.
No.
Okay. You heard it directly from John. Please send your daughters to development school. Don't worry about them being little tomboys.
Oh yeah, and I would like to say that we have plenty of girls in our classes.
Okay.
Yeah, plenty.
Nice to hear that. We have Jamie Chan here who's asked, does learning coding means having to go for weekly classes to master it, or a holiday camp can also achieve the same purpose?
I think a holiday camp can achieve the same purpose. Our holiday camps are as short as 3 days, so 9 hours over 3 days.
So we can have a little Zuckerberg in 3 days?
No, well, the idea is to expose the child, and if the child is really interested, he or she will go home and will keep continuing to program. And I've seen that happen with some of our students. So last month at Echelon, we had one of our students speak at the event. He's the youngest ever speaker at Echelon, and he just went on stage and basically said how his parent made him try all sorts of activities, from art to music to sports, and how he sucked at everything. But then in programming, he just kind of found his passion and found something that he's really good at. So I guess the point I'm trying to make here is that you don't know what you don't know. So if the child doesn't try programming, then he will never find out that this could be something that is of interest to him. And the other point I want to make is that it doesn't matter if the child doesn't end up becoming a programmer. The idea is to get him to think like a programmer. So it's the way you think. It's not so much which programming languages can you code in.
Mm-hmm. We've got Mummy Manoli here who's asked, other than the obvious plus point of learning to code, what other soft skills do kids learn by knowing how to code? Which I think is a follow-up to what you were just talking about.
Yeah, so at Saturday Kids, we believe in combining the human-centered nature of design thinking with the sort of logical thinking that comes with computational thinking. So in terms of soft skills, I'll give you an example, right? So this here is little bits. So little bits is little electronic modules that you snap together. Let me show you how. So this is the power module. You just plug it in, and then there's a simple input module and an output module. Right? So you turn it on, and there you go. See, you can see something light up, right? So it's something as simple as this. So instead of just giving the child these modules and say, hey, go do something with it, we give them a scenario. For example, you are going to a party, and to get into the party, you need to make something with little bits. So you need to come up with a party costume. So through scenarios like that, the child has to think about, has to be creative, and in this instance, it's not a problem that he needs to solve. But then there are other scenarios like, this person got injured, he needs help with his arm. Can you use little bits to invent something to help him? So basically, we use design thinking to teach kids to empathize with people, especially with the people who will be using their creation. Yeah, so that's an example of a soft skill.
So a great way to learn empathy.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, it's wonderful. So we've got an anonymous user who said, I want my son to learn coding, but he's just not interested. How can I get him to be interested?
Yeah, so I find it surprising because practically every child that we have taught Scratch to, they get really excited almost immediately when they can see their cat bouncing up and down, left and right. Because like I said just now, it's instantaneous feedback, right? You get to see what you just did. So I guess my question to this parent would be, what language do you use to introduce him to programming? I think the important thing is to make it fun for them. So as long as they're having fun and they're engaged, they will want to continue to learn. So yeah, that's my advice.
So give a fun environment.
Yeah.
Great. We have Waiting here who says, are there any iPad apps that I could use to teach my kids coding?
Yeah, so I mentioned Scratch Junior just now. Lightboard, Hopscotch is a very popular one. Yeah, and there must be others. These are the three that come to mind immediately. Yeah.
Great. We have, how do I get my kid to be obsessive about programming and building things without him or her losing empathy and human touch?
Yeah, so just now, the example I gave, we try to give scenarios that combine design thinking with computational thinking. I'm not sure it's a good idea to try to get your child to obsess over coding or anything else for that matter, but empathy is something that is not natural to kids, right? Because kids think about themselves first, and that's why we always have to tell them to share. Maybe a good way is to get them to code a game that is not for them but for their younger sibling, for example, or their friend. So they start thinking about what their friend wants to play, or what their younger sibling wants to play, or what their younger sibling can understand when they're coding the game.
That's a great suggestion.
Yeah, thanks.
We have so the last two questions, and we have, my wife does not want my son to learn coding. She wants him to become a doctor. My son is 4 years old and he's quite fascinated with games and my iPad. I feel I should overrule her and send him for classes. How do I convince my wife?
Well, so my answer to that is that it's not mutually exclusive, being able to program and becoming a doctor, right? I'm sure there are doctors out there who know how to program. And I read a recent New York Times article about how technology has changed the way people work. And one of the examples in the article is a doctor. And he said that because of the time that he has spent learning new technology, he feels that he's a better doctor today because he can do more for his patients. So I really don't think that you should force your child down a certain path. Just because my wife is a lawyer, I'm not going to tell any of my kids you have to be a lawyer. And B, it really doesn't matter which profession you're in. Programming is just a really useful skill to have.
Okay. And also don't use words like overruling your wife. That's probably not going to get you any further in your mission. We've got the last question for tonight, and that is, which should be the lucky one. Does learning to code help my child with her studies? She's in primary 2 this year.
I think it's going to be difficult to see sort of tangible improvements in grades. Although some of our students we've spoken to say that after learning how to code, they become more logical. They are better at math because there's a lot of math involved in coding. But in terms of tangible outcomes, in terms of getting an A star for science instead of A, I don't think anybody can promise you that. What I can promise you is that learning to code introduces your child to a new way of thinking. They start thinking about things like automation and abstraction and decomposition, which is basically breaking down a problem into smaller problems. So that's really what we want, the outcome that we want, which is to get kids to start thinking like programmers.
Fabulous. Thank you again for joining us today for today's session. For all of you who are tuning in, you are tuning in to ParentTown TV. If you have any more questions, you can ask it on the Why Kids Should Code topic, and John will still be there to answer some questions. And if John doesn't answer the question, then the in-house team at ParentTown will be answering the question. At ParentTown, we promise you no unanswered questions. We look forward to seeing you next Tuesday for our next session. Thank you and good night.